My name is Athena Reynolds. I'm 33 years old. 2 months ago, my mother stood up at our annual family reunion, held a microphone in front of 47 relatives, and announced she was giving her entire estate to my brother. I only kept you because your father made me. Everyone at that table already knew I wasn't her biological daughter. My dad brought me home as a newborn after my birth mother passed away. Virginia raised me. I called her mom for 33 years. That was never a secret. But hearing her say she'd been pretending to love me, that she'd faked it for 3 decades because my father forced her hand, that was new. That was a knife I didn't see coming. Before I take you back to that afternoon, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly speaks to you. Let me take you back to early June, the day my mother tried to bury me, and the day I decided to dig up a truth she never wanted found. The Reynolds farm sits on 120 acres outside Millbrook, Virginia, rolling pasture, a white oak tree along the creek, and a farmhouse my father built with his own hands 40 years ago. Every board, every beam. Harold Reynolds measured it, cut it, nailed it himself. I grew up knowing I wasn't Virginia's biological daughter. Dad never hid it. He told me when I was old enough to ask. Your birth mother's name was Claire. She passed away a few weeks after you were born. I brought you home because you're my daughter. Simple, no drama, no shame. He carried me into this town in broad daylight, and every neighbor on Route 12 knew the story. Virginia agreed to raise me, and the community praised her for it. What a good woman, they said, taking in Harold's child like her own. But I always felt the difference. Phew. James sat in the front seat of Virginia's car. I sat in the back. James got asked what he wanted for dinner. I ate what was served. James heard, "You're so much like me." I heard you should be grateful. The gaps were small enough to explain away. Maybe I was just quieter. Maybe Virginia bonded more naturally with her biological son. Maybe I was reading into things. Then Dad would come home from the workshop, sawdust on his flannel, and pull me into a hug that smelled like oak and turpentine. "You are my daughter," he'd say. Not more, not less. He never treated James and me differently, not once. I remember being 9, standing in the hallway past my bedtime, hearing Virginia tell our neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, something she thought I couldn't hear. I raised that girl because Harold wants me to. I never had a choice in it. I went back to bed. I didn't cry. I just decided I'd be so good that one day she'd choose me on her own. She never did. Dad died 5 years ago. Heart attack on a Tuesday morning, halfway between the barn and the house. He was 62. At the funeral, Virginia delivered the eulogy. She mentioned James by name 3 times. She mentioned the farm, the community, Harold's siblings. She talked about what a devoted husband he was, what a provider. She never said my name. I sat in the second pew between Aunt Margot and Cousin Rachel, and I told myself it was grief. People forget things when they're grieving. It didn't mean anything. After the burial, when the last casserole dish had been returned and the relatives had driven home, Virginia found me in Dad's workshop. I was sitting on his stool holding a chisel he'd sharpened the morning he died. She stood in the doorway, didn't step inside. She looked at me the way you look at a piece of furniture that came with the house. Something you never picked. Something you tolerate because removing it would leave a mark on the floor. "Things are going to be different now," she said. "Your father isn't here to protect you anymore." I didn't understand that sentence for 5 years. After Harold's death, Virginia shifted, not overnight, slowly, like a tide pulling back. She started calling James weekly, then daily. I looked past Margot's shoulder toward the head table. Virginia sat straight-backed, hair freshly set, wearing the navy dress she saved for church and funerals, full makeup, pearl earrings. This wasn't a barbecue outfit. This was a stage costume. And there, beside her plate, propped against the salt shaker, a wireless microphone. Virginia picked up the microphone at 4:17 p.m. I know the exact time because I glanced at my phone when I heard the feedback squeal. That sharp electric whine that made everyone stop mid-sentence and turn toward the head table. She tapped it twice, smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. If I could have everyone's attention for a moment. I have an announcement. The yard went quiet in stages. Laughter dying off, conversations trailing into whispers, kids shushed by their parents. 47 faces turned toward Virginia Reynolds, matriarch widow, the woman who held this family together. That was the story. Anyway, as you all know, Harold left us 5 years ago. Since then, I've been thinking about the future of this farm, the house, our family's legacy. She paused. Let the gravity settle. I've made my decision. Everything, the farm, the house, my savings, will go to James, my son, the only real family I have. James sat beside her, jaw set, eyes forward, not surprised, not even a flicker. Uncle Dean stood up at the far table. Virginia, what about Athena? She's part of this family too. Virginia turned toward Dean the way a teacher turns toward a child who's spoken out of turn. Sit down, Dean. This is my decision. Then she looked at me across 40 feet of mowed grass and checkered tablecloth and 47 silent relatives. Athena was never really mine. I raised her because Harold made me. 33 years I pretended, but Harold is gone now. She made it sound sordid, shameful, like he'd committed some moral crime by bringing formula, diapers, the drive to the hospital, and back. And when I got to his house, he was sitting in the kitchen with you on his chest. And the first thing he said was, "This is my daughter." She turned a few pages, paused. "I need to tell you something, Athena. Before your father met Claire, before any of that, Virginia was very close with a man at her office, Neil Whitfield. I don't have proof. I don't have dates. But Harold changed during that time. He was sad in a way I'd never seen." Margot closed the album, looked at me straight. If anyone in this house has a secret, it's not Harold. Harold lived in the light. I sat with that. Margot wasn't a woman who said things lightly. She'd been a school teacher for 35 years. She weighed words like a pharmacist weighs pills. No more than necessary, never less than accurate. Then I picked up the album again, flipped to the pages with James as a toddler. Brown curly hair, blue eyes, square jaw, tall for his age. Dad had brown eyes, a round face, broad shoulders from labor, not genetics, compact build. James didn't look like Harold. I'd never noticed before. Or maybe I had, and I just never let myself finish the thought. The Ancestry DNA kit arrived in a white box with blue lettering. I set it on the kitchen counter and stared at it for 10 minutes. The instructions were simple. Spit in a tube, seal it, mail it back, wait 2 to 3 weeks for results. My goal was straightforward. Confirm that Harold Reynolds was my biological father. Virginia was already telling people he'd felt guilty about that woman, implying I might not even be Harold's. If his family line showed up in my DNA, that lie died on arrival. But there was a second reason I didn't plan. James' profile was already in the Ancestry database. Lily had given him that kit 3 years ago. His results were uploaded, active, searchable. When my results came back, the system would automatically compare our DNA and calculate a relationship prediction. If James and I were full siblings, roughly 50% shared DNA, half siblings, around 25%. If something else was going on, something that involved a man named Neil Whitfield, and a photograph stamped Spring Fling 88, the number would tell me. I opened the tube, followed the instructions, sealed it, drove to the post office, and handed it to the clerk at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. Then I went home and waited. Waiting is the hardest part, not because I was scared of the answer. I already knew who my father was. Harold Reynolds taught me to change a tire, balance a checkbook, and look people in the eye when they're lying to me. No spit test would undo that. The hard part was knowing that while I waited, Virginia wasn't waiting. She was calling, posting, rewriting, building a version of history where Harold was the sinner and she was the saint. And I couldn't stop her. Not yet. I'm sitting here waiting for DNA results, and I realize I'm not waiting to find out who I am. I already know I'm Harold Reynolds' daughter. I'm waiting for proof that nobody can deny. So, here's what I want to ask you. What do you think the DNA is going to show? And more importantly, what do you think Virginia will do when the truth lands on her doorstep? Drop your prediction in the comments. I want to hear it. 10 days after the reunion, I opened my mailbox and found a letter from the law offices of Greer and Associates in Charlottesville. Thick envelope, embossed letterhead, the kind of paper that costs more per sheet than most people's lunch. I read it standing in the hallway of my building. Virginia had formally amended her will. The farm, the house, the savings accounts, all transferred to James upon her death. I was removed entirely, the stated reason typed in crisp legal language. Athena Reynolds is not a biological child of Virginia Reynolds and therefore not a recognized heir to the Reynolds family estate. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer next to the phone bill. Then I called an estate attorney for a free consultation. 30 minutes, that's all I needed. Virginia can change her portion of the estate however she wants. The attorney said that's her legal right. But your father's will, Harold Reynolds, was probated in 2021. My father, Harold Reynolds, who built every shelf in the church nursery, who plowed driveways for free every winter, who never once raised his voice at anyone in this town, and Virginia was turning him into a cautionary tale. Old Mr. Patterson, Dad's closest friend, 81 years old, still sharp as a roofing nail, caught me at the corner of Elm and Third. Athena, he gripped my arm. Your father was the most decent man this town ever had. I don't believe a word that woman says. Not one. Rachel called me that night, breathless. Athena, I found something. Margot had a storage closet full of family papers, tax documents, Christmas cards, church bulletins dating back decades. Rachel had been going through them since the reunion, looking for anything that might corroborate what Margot remembered about Virginia and Neil. There's a photo, Rachel said. Company picnic, Virginia's real estate office, spring event. She's standing next to a man, dark hair, blue eyes, tall. The back of the photo says V and N. Spring fling, 88, 88, 88, the year James was born. I looked up Neil Whitfield, Rachel continued. He died in 2015, but he has a son, Wade Whitfield, 30 years old, lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. I let that sit. Athena, I pulled up Neil's obituary photo. I compared it to the picnic picture. Rachel paused. Then I looked at James' Facebook profile and the jawline, the eyes, the way they smile. It's the same smile. Athena, James looks nothing like Uncle Harold, but he looks exactly like Neil Whitfield. I closed my eyes, saw Dad's face, round, warm, weathered from outdoor work, brown eyes, compact build, hands too big for his frame. Then James, angular jaw, blue eyes, 6'1". I'd spent 33 years seeing them side by side and never let myself connect the dots. Don't tell anyone yet, I said. Not anyone yet, I said. The DNA results aren't back. How long? 1 to 2 days. The app says processing. Rachel exhaled. Athena, if this is what we think it is. Then Virginia didn't just lie about me. She used me as a smokescreen for a secret she's been hiding for 40 years. I hung up and sat in the dark. The shape of the truth was forming, and it looked nothing like the story Virginia had been telling. I drove to Millbrook that weekend and sat on Aunt Margot's porch as the sun dropped behind the ridge. From her hill, you could see the Reynolds farm, the white farmhouse, the workshop, the old tractor shed Dad always meant to paint. The lights in the kitchen were on. Virginia was home, probably sitting in the chair Harold built for her 30th birthday, drinking the Earl Grey she bought in bulk from the grocery in Charlottesville. Aunt Margot, I said, not looking away from the farm. If the DNA says Harold wasn't my biological father, I lose everything, not just the inheritance. I lose him. Margot rocked in her chair, took her time. You won't lose Harold. Harold chose you. Blood or no blood. That man drove to the hospital the night Claire passed, signed every paper they put in front of him, and carried you home. He didn't do that out of guilt. He did it because you were his. I knew she was right. In every way that mattered, Harold was my father. But in a courtroom, in a will that says my children, biology matters. If I wasn't Harold's by blood, Virginia's lawyer would argue I had no legal standing. The farm would go to James. The house Dad built with his hands would be sold to a developer. Everything Harold Reynolds poured his life into would be erased. I checked the app. Results processing. Estimated delivery 1 to 2 days. I put the phone away, stared at the farmhouse across the valley, the yellow kitchen light. I wish Dad were alive. And we're alive. Not to protect me. I'd stopped needing protection a long time ago, but to tell him that whatever the results said, he was my father. Every day, every board he nailed, every morning, he made pancakes shaped like animals because he thought it was funny. The court wouldn't accept love as evidence, but I would. Wednesday, 7:14 a.m. I was pouring coffee when my phone buzzed. Your Ancestry DNA results are ready. I sat down, set the mug on the counter, opened the app. The screen loaded in stages. Ethnicity estimates first, then the part I needed. DNA relatives matches. Match 1, Rachel Reynolds. Predicted relationship. First cousins shared DNA 12.4%. Read it twice. First cousins shared DNA through a common grandparent. Rachel's father was Harold's brother. If I matched Rachel as a first cousin, my DNA connected directly to the Reynolds family line. Harold was my biological father. I exhaled, set the phone down, picked it up, read it again. The number didn't change. 12.4% first cousin Reynolds bloodline confirmed. Then I scrolled down. Match 2, James Reynolds shared DNA 0.8%. Predicted relationship. No predicted relationship. No predicted relationship. I stared at the screen. Full siblings share roughly 50%. Half siblings share around 25. Below 3%, no close biological connection. 0.8. James and I shared almost no DNA. We weren't siblings. We weren't half siblings. We weren't biologically related at all. I was Harold's daughter. James was not. Virginia had spent 33 years telling me I was the outsider, the one who didn't belong, the charity case, the obligation. And Harold, the man she'd painted as an unfaithful husband who'd forced his mistake on her. Harold was the one who'd been faithful all along. Virginia pointed her finger at me and said, "Blood decides who's real." Fine, blood just decided. And the verdict wasn't what she expected. I set the phone on the counter and pressed my palms flat against the tile. Cold, solid, real. Virginia had stood in front of 47 people and declared James was her only real family. The Reynolds blood, the legitimate heir. She'd used bloodline as her weapon, swung it at me like an axe. And the DNA, her own standard, her own metric, just proved that I was the only Reynolds at the table. James carried Virginia's blood, but Harold's not a trace. She used blood to erase me. Blood just erased him. I called Aunt Margot at 7:31 a.m. She picked up on the first ring. "Aunt Margot, Dad is my biological father." A sharp breath, then thank God. Oh, thank God. I waited for her crying to settle. Then I said the rest. James and I share less than 1% DNA. He's not my sibling, not half, not anything. We have no biological relationship. The line went silent, not the awkward kind. The kind that comes when someone's brain is rearranging 40 years of memory. Neil Whitfield, Margot whispered. Yes, James is Virginia's and Neil's, not Harold's. Did Harold know? I thought about this during the 17 minutes between reading the results and making the call. Harold never said a word against James, never treated him differently, never let the slightest coldness creep into his voice when he said his son's name. I think he suspected, I said. But Dad chose to love James anyway. He chose to stay silent. Margot was crying again quietly. The way people cry when the grief isn't fresh. When it's old, buried grief that just found a new exit. Harold carried that for years. All those years, Margot, he knew Virginia. He knew. And he still loved that boy. That's who Harold was, Margot said. I steadied my voice. Virginia stood in front of the entire family and said, I wasn't real. She humiliated me. She's telling the town that Harold was unfaithful, that he nearly abandoned the family. She's rewriting a dead man's life. I paused, and the whole time, according to her own standard, James is the one who doesn't belong to the Reynolds family. What are you going to do? I'm going to send her the truth the right way. I wrote the letter 4 times. The first draft was furious. 3 pages of everything I'd never said. How it felt to sit in the back seat. To hear you should be grateful instead of I love you. To watch her erase me from Dad's eulogy. I let myself write every word. Then I shredded it. The second draft was cold clinical. I sounded like I was filing a tax amendment. Shredded? The third was too short. Passive-aggressive shredded. Virginia stood in front of every one of us at that reunion. She looked Athena in the face and said she was never real family. She told this town that Harold was unfaithful, that Harold forced her to raise another woman's child. Dean's neck was red. His hands gripped the arms of his chair, nearer. And the whole damn time, it was Virginia who stepped out. James is the one who isn't Harold's. Cousin Mark stood up. She desecrated Harold's memory in public with a microphone. Harold couldn't defend himself. Aunt Phyllis added quietly, she was 81. Harold's oldest sister hadn't spoken to anyone in the family since her hip surgery, but she'd driven 40 minutes to be in this room. He's been in the ground 5 years, and she's slandering him to anyone who listened, calling him unfaithful, saying he forced her. That man never forced anyone to do anything in his life. Phyllis picked up her phone and called Virginia right there in the living room. Virginia didn't answer. By the end of that week, 8 members of the Reynolds family had called Virginia. Not to yell, just to say they knew, and they were disappointed. Virginia's phone calls went to voicemail. Her Facebook posts went unanswered. Old Mr. Patterson ran into Virginia outside the post office on a Tuesday. Margot heard about it from 3 different people. Harold Reynolds carried that girl home in broad daylight because Harold lived honest. Patterson told Virginia, "You hid a secret for 40 years. Don't you ever speak his name like that again." Virginia didn't respond. She got in her car and drove home. James finally opened the results on a Thursday night. Lily told me later he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop for 45 minutes before clicking the link. The screen loaded. He saw his match list, his predicted relationships, and the absence where Athena Reynolds' sister should have been replaced by no predicted relationship. He drove to Millbrook the next morning, 4 hours, didn't call ahead. Lily told me what happened in pieces over 3 separate phone calls because James didn't tell her all at once. He'd say a few sentences, go quiet, say a few more days later. He walked into the kitchen. Virginia was at the table. Neil Whitfield? Who is Neil Whitfield? Mom. Virginia pressed her hands flat on the table. Her fingers were white. You don't understand, James. It was complicated. Harold and I, we weren't happy. Neil was, who is my father? Harold is your father. Harold is not my father. The DNA says 0, Mom. 0. Virginia started to cry. Not the controlled audience-ready tears she produced at the reunion. Messy, jagged crying, the kind that comes from a place that hasn't been opened in decades. I loved Neil, she whispered. Harold was a good man. But Neil was just what? James's voice broke. The man who taught me to ride a bike, who sat in the bleachers at every game I ever played, who worked that farm 60 hours a week so I could go to college, who I called Dad every single day of my life. Virginia reached for his hand. James pulled it away. You humiliated Athena in front of the whole family because she wasn't blood. You said blood is what makes someone real family. Those were your words, Mom. With a microphone, his chin trembled. But I'm the one who isn't blood. You knew. You always knew. And you chose to destroy Athena to protect your lie about me. He walked out the front door, didn't look back. Lily said James didn't speak to Virginia for 3 weeks, the longest silence of Virginia's life. And for the first time, she was the one waiting for a phone that never rang. I hired an estate attorney the following Monday. Formal retainer paid with money. I'd saved over 7 years of working Saturdays nobody noticed. I sat across from her desk and laid out the facts like a balance sheet because that's how I process the world. Credits, debits, what adds up and what doesn't. Harold's will probated August 2021. Property split 50% to Virginia, 50% divided equally between my children, Athena and James. The farm, the house, the savings. The attorney reviewed the documents. Virginia amended her own will. That's within her rights. She can leave her 50% to whoever she chooses, but Harold's portion is governed by his will. He named you specifically. Virginia's legal team is arguing I shouldn't qualify as Harold's child. The DNA results eliminate that argument entirely. You're Harold's biological daughter. It's in the data. I nodded. Then I said the part that mattered most. I don't want to remove Virginia from the house. She lives there. I'm not going to put a 67-year-old woman on the street. The attorney looked up. I want to protect the farm. Virginia has been talking about transferring everything to James. James mentioned to Lily that a developer offered to buy the land last year, 120 acres outside Millbrook. That's prime real estate for subdivision. You want to block the sale. I want to preserve what my father built. He cleared that land. He planted those trees. He built that house board by board by board. The attorney filed a petition that week to protect Harold's estate from unauthorized transfer. There was an irony I didn't miss. By DNA, James wasn't Harold's biological son. But Harold wrote James' name in his will because Harold chose to love him. I wasn't going to cross that name out. Dad wouldn't have wanted that. Dad wrote both our names. I told the attorney I'm protecting both. 6 weeks later, I drove to Millbrook on a Saturday morning before the sun cleared the ridge. The farm was quiet. Virginia wasn't Home. She'd gone to stay with James and Lily in the city, a temporary arrangement that everyone knew was Virginia's way of running from the town that now whispered her name instead of mine. I parked by the workshop, got out, stood in the grass for a minute, just breathing. The fields stretched out in every direction, green from the June rains, the white oaks along the creek taller than I remembered. Dad planted those when I was 3. I climbed them when I was 10. Now they shaded half the south pasture. I pushed open the workshop door. The smell hit me first. Oak shavings, linseed oil. The faint ghost of the coffee Dad brewed on the workbench hot plate every morning at 5. His tools hung on the pegboard exactly where he'd left them. Claw hammer, hand plane, the chisel I'd held the day of the funeral, a pencil still tucked behind a bracket, sharpened to a point he never got to use. Everything in its place, everything waiting for hands that wouldn't come back. I ran my fingers along the workbench, found a groove he'd worn into the edge from years of clamping board smooth as riverstone. Next to it, a coffee mug ring stained into the wood, 5 years old and still visible, like a fingerprint he'd left behind on purpose. On the shelf above the bench, I noticed something I'd missed before, a small framed photo, dusty, turned slightly toward the wall. I picked it up. Dad and me, standing beside the white oak he planted the year I was born. I was maybe 7 in the photo, sitting on his shoulders, both of us squinting into the sun on the back in his handwriting. Me and my girl, best day. I put it back on the shelf facing forward this time. Margot's truck pulled up at 7:30. She brought coffee and 2 blueberry muffins from Donovan's. We sat on the workshop porch looking out at the farm Harold built and said almost nothing for 20 minutes. Some silences are the fullest conversations you'll ever have. Then Margot said, "Harold would be proud of you, not because you won, because you stayed honest." I held my coffee with both hands and watched the sun hit the farmhouse windows. For the first time in months, the view didn't hurt. It just looked like home. 2 months after the reunion, a letter arrived at my apartment. Handwritten James's penmanship, tight, slanted, the kind of writing that comes from someone pressing too hard on the pen. No return address, but I recognized the stationery. Lily kept a box of cream-colored cards in their kitchen drawer. I'd seen it at Christmases. I opened it standing up, read it twice before I sat down. "Athena, I don't know what to say to you. Hoo. I've started this letter 6 times and thrown every version away. This is the one I'm mailing because if I rewrite it again, I'll never send it. I don't know who I am anymore. My whole life, I thought Harold was my father. I looked at him and saw myself. Now I look in the mirror and I see a stranger. I keep pulling up that photo Rachel found Neil Whitfield at the company picnic. The jawline, the eyes, they're mine. I started therapy last week. The therapist asked me what I lost, and I said, my father. She said, Harold is still my father, but it's not the same. It's not the same, and I don't know how to make it the same. I'm not going to apologize in this letter because I don't know how to apologize for something this large. I sat next to Mom at that reunion, and I let her do what she did. I didn't say a word. That's going to take me a long time to sit with. I just need time. James? I folded the letter, set it on the table, didn't reply. James was in pain. Real pain. Not the performed kind Virginia specialized in. His identity had cracked down the middle, and he was trying to hold the two halves together with shaking hands. I didn't owe him forgiveness, but I could afford him time. Time was something nobody in this family had ever given me. I wrote Virginia one final letter. This time, I only needed one draft. Mom, I'm not going to pretend everything is fine. You used my origins to control me for 33 years. You stood in front of our family and announced you'd been faking love for me since the day Dad brought me home. You told this town that Harold was unfaithful, the most honest man Millbrook has ever known. You rewrote a dead man's story to protect your own. I know the truth now. I know about Neil. I know that James is Neil's son, not Harold's. I know that Dad probably suspected, and I know he chose to love James anyway, because that's the kind of man Harold Reynolds was. You're not that kind of person, Mom. You had the same choice Dad had to love a child who wasn't biologically yours. And you spent 33 years reminding me that I wasn't enough. I don't hate you. Hate takes energy. I'd rather spend on things that matter. But I will not allow you to continue doing what you've done. I will not absorb your lies. I will not stand still while you rewrite my father's legacy. If you ever want to talk, really talk, not perform, not manipulate, not control, I will listen. But I won't listen to lies. Not anymore. I love you, but I love the truth more. Dad taught me that. I sealed the envelope, mailed it from the same post office counter where I'd sent the DNA results. The clerk recognized me now. Small towns have long memories. I walked to my car, sat behind the wheel, closed my eyes. For the first time in months, my breathing was even, not forced, even actually even. The kind of steady that comes after a storm passes and you realize you're still standing. 6 months later, and here's where things stand. Virginia never apologized, but she stopped calling me the girl who isn't mine. Whether that's growth or strategy, I honestly can't tell. With Virginia, the line between the two has always been blurry. James is in therapy. Lily says he's working through it slowly, the way you dismantle something built on a cracked foundation, one board at a time. He hasn't called me, but he hasn't called Virginia much either. And from what I hear, that silence is teaching her more than any confrontation ever could. The farm is legally protected now. Harold's portion of the estate can't be sold or transferred without my signature. I didn't cross James's name out of Dad's will. Harold wrote both our names because he chose to be a father to both of us, and I'm not going to dishonor that choice. Yeah, Virginia can leave her half to whoever she wants. That's her right. But the land Harold cleared, the house he built, the trees he planted, those stay. I still live in the city, still work the same job, still drive to Millbrook once a month. But now I go to the farm, not to Virginia's kitchen. I sit in Dad's workshop and drink coffee on the porch and listen to the creek. On my desk at home, there are 2 photos now. One is Dad in the workshop smiling, sawdust in his beard. The other is new, a small faded picture Margot found tucked in the back of Dad's toolbox. A woman with brown hair and a tired smile holding a baby in a yellow blanket. Claire, my mother, smiling like someone who knew she wouldn't be there long, but wanted the record to show she was happy. Dad brought me home in broad daylight. No hiding, no shame. He walked through the front door and said, "This is my daughter. That's the biggest inheritance he left me. Not the farm, not the house, the truth that I was chosen. And if you're still here, thank you for staying with me through this whole story." I want to ask you one thing. Do you think Harold knew about James? And if he knew, why do you think he stayed silent all those years? Drop your answer in the comments. Every family has a corner no one talks about. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't speaking up. It's choosing love when you have every reason not to. If you know someone going through something like this, share this video. Check the description for more stories. I'll see you there.